Hey everybody, Shawn Tierney here from Insights in Automation with another Automation Tech Talk live. And during the morning show, we had some disconnects happening. I've tried a different browser. I'm trying a different microphone. So hopefully we get through that. But if I disconnect, I will it seems to take about 30 seconds to come back. But in any case, hey, that's live TV, right? So you can see right now I'm in the training room and we got we got to put a TV rack up there to hold the TV and all this stuff. But in StreamYard does not have a way to zoom in like we normally would in OBS. But besides that, that's okay because guess what? I got a great person who's coming on the show with me today to talk tech, and that is Luis. Luis, could you first of all thank you for coming on, and could you just introduce? I know you've been on the show a lot, but could you introduce yourself to our Tech Talk Live audience?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Shawn. It's been a while since I've been on your show, so I definitely appreciate the invite here and having me on. For those of you who I've never met before, I'm Luis Narvaez. I work for Siemens Industry, based out of the U.S. I'm a product manager for industrial PLCs. For our PLCs, our 7 1500 and 1200 line. I also am product marketing manager for our industrial security. Um, Features, I should say, within our factory automation portfolio, and then I do another of other things within Siemens. But that's basically the gist of it. And I've been on Shawn's show a few times again to kind of talk about some updates around our PLCs, our controllers, and definitely always enjoyable to be on the show.
Yeah, hey, thank you for coming on, Lewis. And I know if anybody out there um, wants to know a little bit about that security, I think we went through that with the view of things. We had to set up all the security first. So that was a previous tech tip that you'd came on and done. Um, After we did all the security, we got into the view of things. But in any case, I know Siemens, from our pre-show discussion, Siemens is going to be taking part in some cybersecurity events, and you also
Mhm.
had some personal stories to tell about
Mhm.
working with customers who've run into issues. So let me just turn it right back to you, Lewis, and let's hear about cybersecurity.
Yeah, I mean it's a very broad topic, right? And it's kind of a
Yeah,
little bit of a faux pas, a little bit in manufacturing is still something that, a lot of folks that deal with the components within industrial control systems don't have a lot of, let's say, experience in, or maybe it's one of those topics. It's like, like safety 20, 30 years ago, industrial, machine safety and all that stuff, where it's still kind of new in the OT space, and not everybody's certified and things like that. And so um, I got into cybersecurity kind of out of passion a little bit, and just curiosity. From my side is a little background. I really like playing chess, and I kind of see cybersecurity as one of those like chess topics. It's a little bit competitive in a way that you kind of have to anticipate your opponent's next move, right? And plan for that, whether it's a defense strategy or whether it's an attack strategy. And so, from the OT space, if you're an asset owner or a manufacturer, right, you're always trying to put yourself in that mindset of like, what is the biggest, what kind of risk am I allowing my organization to be exposed to when it comes to cybersecurity? And it's not really something that's broadly adopted or measured, but something I like talking about, and I love it when customers come to me, or even anybody who just wants to know about different cybersecurity features within our products and want to understand what can they do to kind of strengthen um, their assets. I love those kinds of conversations. So I had one recently. I want to say last week. Yeah, it was last week with a customer that didn't have a scenario. It wasn't like an issue or anything, but it was more or less wanted to know what was possible. And it's great because it's great to see that customers are asking those kinds of questions of what can I do better. Um, do
and
you
I'm
get a lot of questions, Sean, or comments, I guess, from your audience regarding cybersecurity?
yeah. Now, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so we kind of predicted this at the beginning of the show. There's some new driver or something on my computer that doesn't like my camera. So, but I am here. You just can't see me. We, you
No
know, we
worries.
cover we cover cybersecurity quite a bit on our shows because it's such an important factor. We've had uh, ISA on twice to cover 62443,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just really important. If you watch old shows like 24, you can see people are hacking each other all the time. But that's kind of become a reality with the news stories of pipelines being shut down, and you know, I know of one distributor who had to shut down business for 3 days
Mm-hmm.
so they could re-enter all their orders because somebody was holding them hostage and they refused to pay for to unlock their systems. So they
Mm-hmm.
rolled back to a backup and they had to spend 3 days entering 3 days worth of orders. But yeah, so cybersecurity is big, and it can happen from simple things like just plugging your phone into a power outlet at the airport. People
Mm-hmm.
can hack your phone that way. So it's very important. We cover it quite often, and I'm a fan of zero trust, where you only allow the packets, the source destination that you want to happen. For instance,
Mm-hmm.
you only let OPC from, let's say, the SCADA server to the PLCs it's supposed to talk to. And that's it. No other OPC can happen anywhere on the plant floor
Mm-hmm.
except for those exact places. And then you can use, of course, signed, right? Signatures, right? And
Yep.
I mean, what's the status with, let's talk about this for a minute. What's the status with OPC in Siemens PLCs? Because I think both the S7 1200 and 1500 have that
Mm-hmm.
as an option, right?
Yeah, so we've had OPC UA server and client in our S7 1500, I want to say since like 2015, 2016. Um, I don't remember exactly which firmware level it is or what TIA portal version was at that time, but it's been quite a while. It's pretty mature within our product already. The S7 1200 got it, I think, in version 16 TIA portal, firmware 4.4 OPC UA server, and OPC UA server, OPC UA, I guess, is probably one of the more, I guess, recommended industrial protocols when it comes to security for northbound. Like, let's say like you mentioned, connecting a PLC to like a SCADA system. It's more widely supported. I know within our PLCs, as of version 17, both the 1500 and 1200 also have TLS 1.3 for the S7 uh, protocol driver that's used to like either download programs or access diagnostics. And that's oftentimes been the protocol used for communication to HMIs or to SCADA systems and stuff. It still is today. Um, I don't I don't know that there's many vendors yet that support the encrypted version of that, the TLS um, side of it. So, in those cases, maybe OPC UA might be better because, again, it's also has that kind of security built in and authentication piece built in as well. And again, it's more widely supported for all kinds of systems, third party systems, and so um, if the S7, if that's an aspect of it that customers look for, then that's something that they could do within our controllers. I think you mentioned one thing about the zero trust, and I want to point out that that's the crazy that's the great thing I like about zero trust too is that in the past we've always kind of had like these kind of like anointed systems of like, okay, this is a trusted device, so let's allow all or whatever. Whereas the concept of zero trust is authenticate all, even if it's considered a quote unquote trusted device, right? Like we know that PLC is a trusted device and we know it's talking to this SCADA server, um, but or SCADA client, sorry. But you still want to authenticate that the information going to the SCADA client is from that trusted device, and the device is sending that information to the trusted client and stuff. And so there's still that kind of zero trust principle in place there where you're having that kind of dual factor um, authentication side on both the sender and the receiver side, which I'm still not as broadly implemented in OT space as we'd like, but I think with time we'll start to see a lot more maturity when it comes to those things. The one thing you mentioned also that I want to point out is the impact that it has on businesses, right? So You mentioned you know of a local distributor that went through a recent, let's say, ransomware. It sounded like situation, and I think that's an important message that I think a lot of people tend to think that I'm a small business, I'm a small organization, I'm not at risk for a cyber attack, and I'm not susceptible. But I think what you have to think about is that smaller organizations actually have a larger risk when it comes to cyber attacks. If you a larger impact when it comes to cyber attacks. They may not have the funds to pay off a ransomware. They may not have the resources to respond or recover from a cyber incident. Do organizations even know if there's people in their networks already just kind of sniffing around and monitoring what's going on? A lot of cyber attacks don't happen just like that. It's a very long process of getting through the door, collecting information, and then maybe executing whatever it is you want to do, whether it's that ransomware attack or whether it's shutting down a system, if depending on who the target is and what your intended what the adversary's intended response is. But small businesses, right? I mean, imagine if you are a small, a distributor, right, compared to, let's say, like a big food and beverage company, or a big company like Amazon or something like that.
Yep.
Company like Amazon would be able to recover pretty quickly. Potentially, I don't know what their disaster recovery system is or anything like that, but they have the resources, a lot more resources that available than a distributor of less than 50 people on staff, or a small manufacturer with less than 100 people, on the plant floor. So thinking about that, I think a lot more people need to start considering what's the impact if we were to go in under any kind of cyber attack, and what can I do to mitigate that impact, as quickly, or as kind of, I like to call it, that low hanging fruit. Address those low hanging fruit
Yeah.
items that can easy to implement, and has some effectiveness.
It reminds me of when I went to server training. So I had to get trained. This is back in the late 90s
Hmm.
as I was becoming I had been doing PLCs, HMIs, VFDs, but I had to get certified on SCADA. And part of that was getting trained on Windows NT 4.0 client and server, and going to Microsoft and getting the server, passing the tests and getting all Microsoft
Hmm.
certified. And part of that I'll never forget is that it's a requirement that you back up your data.
Hmm.
And one of the sticks they use to whack people with who don't do that is the stat that most companies who lose their data are not able to stay open. They end up going bankrupt or closing
Yeah.
down or whatever. But most companies who lose their data, who just have like lost their hard drive, lost the server, whatever. And so how many machines have we seen over the years where the program gets wiped out and the
They
machine
don't have a
just never,
backup.
yeah, there's the OEM's out of business. They don't have a backup. And that
Yep.
machine, trying to re-engineer that machine, that could be
It's going to
that
cost
could be
hundreds of
months.
thousands of
Yeah.
dollars and downtime too. Yep.
And
Yeah,
if
and
that's your
that's the
primary
impact.
machine, you're out of business.
And that's the impact I'm talking about. I think a lot more people are starting to realize that impact and starting to take action. And again, they want to see those quick and easy solutions that can help address and mitigate. Maybe it's not the one size fits all, or end all be all solution, but you know my goal is to kind of evangelize a little bit, kind of that those features, those subsets within our products that can that people can do to help mitigate that, right? In the event that you have had a cyber incident, what can you do to prevent against that data loss, against data manipulation, or loss of safety, loss of control? The last thing you want to do, especially if you're a factory, if you're a manufacturer, is lose control of your safety. Not you If you can't guarantee the safety of your employees, that's probably the biggest stop, or your customers at if that matter, right? If you're a water, wastewater, or some utility customer or energy provider, if you can't guarantee the safety or reliability of your operations, or your to your employees or to your customers, then I mean, that that's got to be the biggest impact, or biggest risk that you can't afford to take. And I know a lot of organizations, prioritize that as number one priority over anything else, right? Over profitability, over availability, and things like that, is safety. Um,
Yeah.
and so, I had a recent meeting with a customer, and the thing is, um, I kind of had a little bit of an epiphany recently with that. I always kind of like to evangelize, like I said, of those security features within our products, within our our controllers and things like that. And they're features built in, so it's not like we make any additional money or anything like that by doing this. It's really to protect our customers, to really protect ourselves too, right? I mean, a lot of our customers at Siemens and other um, vendors, we owe it to the public to also inform them um, of these features and functions, right? Because there's
Yeah.
a lot more at stake to it. But I had a meeting with a customer recently where they wanted to do user authentication and access controls their um, into their industrial control system, into their
Yeah.
PLC essentially. And up to this point, they were not aware that we had anything
Yeah.
like that within our PLCs or within our TI portal. And um, full disclosure, our PLCs have had access controls, access levels for, I mean, I want to say even the S7 300s had that implemented. With the 1200s and 1500s, we definitely have that as one of the, let's say, barriers to get prevent unauthorized access. But they were looking for a solution that was, manageable across a, let's say, distributed architecture, so I could quickly update and manage users, passwords. If somebody leaves the company or changes roles, how can I adapt their functional rights to the PLC or to the HMI, or whatever? And I went in there, trying to understand their current process of how they do things, or how they would like to do things. And um, my initial thought was, I'm going to spit at them every single feature that we have to protect, and they're going to be so impressed with all these. And they what they were really impressed with was the ability to protect their projects. And I guess the kind of switch for me was understanding that not every customer needs every security feature function enabled or used in their factory. It really depends on their processes, their operating procedures, and things like that. And this particular organization happens to have a very mature process. They've done it for a long time, where their maintenance people or technicians, when they need to go service equipment, they will follow a certain, and I don't want to give away too much, but they will
Mhm.
follow a certain um, procedure to access this device. And then on top of that, there's physical access control measures that they already have in place to the control room. So in theory, you can't really bypass the process in place without having some level of accountability and physical, I guess, physical accountability already in place. And that's a really powerful message, because I think a lot of people also tend to forget the organizational measures and the processes and the policies and procedures and how to enforce that, and how powerful that can be just in mitigating cyber risk. And it may not cost a whole lot of money to do that, because it's really, it's awareness, it's making sure that people follow those processes and policies in place. And everything else, the technology and the features within the technology, is kind of the icing on the cake, right? It's extra.
Yeah.
um, Sometimes the organizational measures is enough.
Yeah, I mean, we got these different levels, and I think the first starts with standard operating procedures, right?
Hmm.
And getting your, and I've read this. We had one article this year we covered where a company was bringing their people in, or maybe it was at a trade show, but they
Hmm.
were bringing their people in and getting them involved in cybersecurity. So Most people today, they're going to bring their phones with them, right? And
Hmm.
unless it's like a government paper mill or something to do with the government, like a military, then it's probably people are probably bringing their phones all over the place. But
Hmm. Lost you there, Shawn, for a little bit. All right, looks like Shawn dropped out. I don't know where Shawn was going with that, but I guess one thing, to Shawn, you back or
I think I am. Are you
okay?
there?
Yeah, I'm there. You dropped out. Your camera dropped out for a second, and then and your audio as well. But it sounds like your audio's back, but the camera's not back yet. But
Yeah, I've been having this problem all day with StreamYard. Never had it happen before, but just the point is, you got to work with your employees. They're not malicious. They probably want to keep their job and do a good job.
hmm.
So,
Yeah.
work with your employees, train them, educate them so they can be part of the solution. But then you have to have the physical stuff, right? If it's not general access, it needs to be locked up. If it's control room personnel only, don't let people go in there to have lunch.
Hmm.
If and then make sure you're and implement zero trust in your routers and your switches. Don't leave the whole network floor wide open. Only use zones and conduits like we talked about on the automation podcast
Hmm.
to segregate your network. And again, it's nice to have everything wide open at home, but when you're in a plant, you need to protect your different processes from somebody who's hacking somebody's phone or tablet or whatever. And then of course you want to make sure you use signed everything, right? So
Hmm.
signed, digitally signed everything, right? So you got and all the vendors support that, including Siemens, where you have signed firmware, you have passwords and login. You don't want somebody just grabbing a trial edition of Step 7 and being able to
Yeah.
program your PLC, right? So you got to
There's
implement that, and you got to this requires a little professionalism
yeah.
because maintaining this, it's not a lot of
It's
time,
continu Yeah, it's
but
continuous though too. That's
yeah,
the hard part for a lot of organizations too, is maintaining that processes, updating those processes as the life cycle of these devices
yeah,
age, right? As the factory tends to modernize and or add new assets to the process, right? Updating those documents, updating those procedures, updating staff is also important. And I think that to me that's the hardest part is defining who's owning all that processes, defining who's going to be maintaining those policies and procedures. Because again, if you're a small business, a relatively small or medium sized manufacturer, you may not have the people in place to maintain that. If you're leaving that up to your OT guys,
yeah,
they've also got to maintain equipment. They've got to
yeah,
maintain the SCADA system. They've got to keep the lines running and everything. And to
yeah,
worry about policies is like, well, that's not my job. Give that to the IT guy. And then the IT guy doesn't know anything about the OT devices. So
yeah,
they just say, firewall everything else, block all ports. And then the OT guy gets mad because he can't download to his,
yeah,
it's a back and forth thing. And I think there's no like, unfortunately, like no one size off a size fits all answer
yeah,
I can give. But I do know that, it's a very hard thing to look at the organizational things, but it is something that it can mitigate risk quite significantly depending on what you decide from it. I mean, one of the other things that I think to look at is contractors that you started talking about. If everybody comes into the factory, they have their own cell phones, right? And
yeah,
maybe you're connecting to the plant Wi-Fi because the cell phone signal is terrible there or something like that, or maybe you're underground or there's a lot of concrete or something. So you connect to the plant Wi-Fi so you can check your Facebook, but you know that device that you're connecting on the Wi-Fi, maybe that Wi-Fi network is also connected to your OT. Hopefully not, but the reality is there's a lot of flat networks in manufacturing these
yeah,
days that every asset is connected to, every laptop is connected to, every server is connected to because it's easier. Um, and that may not be the best strategy, but it happens. When it comes to contractors, we have customers that are very strict with their policies that like you can't use your laptop when you come in here. You got to use our engineering workstation, right? Because
yeah,
we validated that It's, got the right software versions installed. It's got everything you need. It's got the connection to our project server so you can access the project files and the backups. And, we can audit it, trace it, all that stuff. Um, but also there's a lot of factories that don't have that. They just
Yeah.
care about, hey, I've been down for 4 hours already. Can you just come up and fix this? I don't care
Yeah.
what you got to do. I'm not going to worry about the policies or procedures. And how do you find that right balance where security is not an inhibitor to availability, but also kind of a very critical step? And I think that, again, that's that culture piece, that organizational measures that, people just can't bypass that. But
I think it's easy to tell people like, look, we all know what happens if you drive around without a spare tire. Excuse me.
hmm
We all know what happens if you drive around without a spare tire or a jack in your trunk, right? And you don't have AAA or one of those things. I mean,
yeah.
you can get stranded. You can get stranded if you run out of gas. You can end up walking for hours. In some places up here in the north, you could actually freeze to death before you find some place, right?
hmm
Like up in the Adirondacks or in Maine or wherever. So there are risks that most of us are not willing to take. Some people aren't willing to take. To drive around without their seatbelt on. We've seen so many people and family members die in car accidents that we always wear a seatbelt. And again, everybody can choose. Every business owner can
hmm
choose what they want to do, but that's the point, right? And like the ISA says, the business owner has to be the one responsible here because it's their business that could go defunct if they don't implement these things. So, just like we talked about with losing a
Yep.
machine, a complicated machine, not a simple machine, but a complicated machine's program, that $500,000 machine may never run again. And so the business owner needs to step up and say, look, all my employees, they can go get a job somewhere else, but this
hmm
is my investment, and I got to make sure that and plus
It's
add
definitely a
in
top-down,
it
message.
has to be. It has to
Yeah.
be. And if you're a business owner and you don't care about backing up your data, well, if you go out of business, we're not going to be we're not going to be crying on your shoulder, or
Yep.
letting you cry on our shoulder. But the other thing too is there are so many new devices coming out. IIoT, small inexpensive devices. I mean, our photo eyes
Yep.
are smart now. Inductive proxies are smart. Our
That is
HMIs
true.
that can act like computers used to, right? And so you got to keep documentation on everything you have on the plant floor, and you don't have to, right? We all know the guy who
Mhm.
who who kept track of every time he repaired his lawnmower and changed the oil, and we're kind of like, oh, but you know what? That's for home use, right? Who cares? You have to buy a new lawnmower, spend a couple grand, right, to get a nice one. But
Yep.
for a company that's worth millions of dollars, if you go down for production, that could put you in the red for the year or put you out of business. So
Yep.
you can't take those kind of risks. But it has to be driven from the asset owner, like the
Yep.
ISA says, because they're the
Yep.
one. Anybody on the plant floor who knows PLCs, they're going to be able to get a job tomorrow. I mean, that's what my students tell
Yep.
me all the time. They're like, that once they learn PLCs, they're very employable anywhere. But
Mhm.
so they can try, but at the end of the day, it's the asset owner who's responsible because it's his neck on the line.
Yeah, and there's I don't know if you've heard about this, but there's companies now that will um offer cyber insurance, right? And a lot of businesses tend to think like, "Oh, I'll just get cyber insurance and I'll be covered, right? In case I get attacked, and they'll just cover everything." But now a lot of these insurance companies are putting contingencies in their policies where you must meet a certain level of compliance, of security maturity or something in your organization. You have to prove it, or there's audits in place now, so these banks or these
Yes.
these insurance companies are not just giving away money and because of negligence.
Yep.
And so there still is some onus on the asset owners um, to adopt and to adopt cybersecurity risk mitigation. You mentioned. I do want to go back. You mentioned the IoT devices, right? And
Yep.
and smart devices. And the important thing is that there is no such thing as 100% cyber risk mitigation. And I know somebody is thinking in their head, and somebody's going to say at some point, that's why you get an air gap, and then no cyber risk exists. That's not true, right? I
Yep.
brought up the situation of what happens when a contractor comes in to service equipment. their laptop has been connected to the internet before. How do you know that they don't have any malware just
Yeah,
lurking in their laptop waiting to be plugged into an OT network? How do you know that your laptop or your workstation or your phone doesn't have any kind of malware, uh, basically waiting to till you plug into a PLC to download, and then now you've got some malware or ransomware, installed on your OT network. There's, it's very hard to detect those, especially if you're a small medium business. So um, air gaps are only go so far, and
yeah,
that's not really the answer. And I guess my point is there's no such thing as 100% secure, and there never will be. Technology evolves, um, cyber threats evolve as well. There's always 0 days. There's always new
yeah,
vulnerabilities being out there, and that's again part of why you have to also maintain and update those policies, procedures, those documents, maybe even devices. Part of that policy might be, when you do your annual PMs, maybe that's when you do your firmware updates.
yeah,
That may not be part of it, because maybe there's other operational risk associated with that, downtime and things like that. But just something to think about, because sometimes firmware updates or patches can address, cyber vulnerabilities. Um, but the hardest part about cybersecurity is defining what is acceptable risk. There has to be some level of acceptable risk, and that, ultimately, again, comes from the top down. That's all a CEO's job is accepting risk and and kind of navigating that, right? Then the rest of the team, figures out how to implement and minimize that or whatever. But
well,
um,
I'm gonna throw out there. Usually, the business owner is accepting the risk. Many CEOs totally destroy their companies and end up with a golden
yeah,
parachute. So
yeah.
those CEOs are and we have many locally over the last
But
50
even
years. Yeah,
But even on the public company spectrum, their job is to do what's best for the company, right? And part of that is
you would
accepting
wish.
or declining risk, right? And there's no such thing as declining 100% risk, because
Yeah.
then you just say, okay, we're just going to move to mechanical everything.
Yeah. I
Okay.
think if you look at most companies, their CEOs are supposed to increase the stock price, which is not
Oh
the
yeah,
best thing for the company. Slash a bunch of people, get a big bonus, and then move on to your next company.
yep.
Not a fan of CEOs.
But
But business owners, the people who actually have money in the game, the people who are
yep,
actually own the company, that's their livelihood. It's like, would you let somebody stop if you owned a bakery? Would you let somebody stop putting miscellaneous ingredients, unknown
yeah,
ingredients from
no,
unknown vendors? And that's
yeah,
what cybersecurity is. It's like, you really want to know. And we while you can't mitigate risk 100%, right? Unless you had a duplicate plant, a factory on a duplicate planet in a duplicate star system, right? Um, the point is that you can reduce it greatly,
yeah.
right? Just like wearing a seatbelt won't protect you from any type of crash, right? For most crashes, it can be a lifesaver, so they say, and I believe that. But and
Keyword
it's
is risk reduction, right? It's
yeah,
not
risk
risk
reduction.
elimination.
Yep. And don't forget,
There's
those backups need to be stored somewhere in the cloud or offsite.
Yep.
A lot of companies started backing up their stuff and put it right in the same office with all the other equipment.
Hmm.
If that office gets taken out by,
A
I don't
fire or
know,
something.
a
Yeah.
fire, not only are your control systems gone, but your backups are gone. I used to love it when I go into
Yep.
people's offices. They would put their magnetic backup tapes from their PLC on top of their massive CRT monitors with that big decals button.
Magnet. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, no, guys, no,
Wipe
that
that
doesn't,
hard drive.
no. It's like it's not working. I'm like, don't ask me why.
Yep.
Stick
Yep.
some floppies up there too while you're at it. But anyways, no, I think that's good, and I think you guys we've covered a lot of the security features in the Siemens products.
Mhm.
There's a lot of security features built into switches and routers and IPCs, HMIs for sure,
Mhm.
and
Even the
we
PLCs now, the
yeah,
PLCs are IO. I mean, and
yep,
it's constantly evolving. The standards, the requirements are changing. And Siemens, that's one thing I'm really proud of, being with Siemens of is how quickly we are to prioritize that in our development
yeah,
cycles. So basically every firmware revision, there's always some new security features being implemented. Just recently with V19, We now implemented UMAC, user management and access control. Before we had access control or access levels, four or
Yep.
four different access levels on the PLC: safety, non-safety, read write, and then read only, and then diagnostics only. Um, but now it's user specific, so you can have a unique username and password. I have my own username and
Yeah.
password, and I can assign specific function rights to you, specific ones to me, specific ones to so on and so forth, as opposed to kind of a blanket access level. Of course, the legacy's still there, but that's pretty impressive to me that that we can get down to that level of granularity now.
Yeah, and I want to roll back to firmware updates. Don't I just my recommendation for the audience is, and I think this is probably how most
Mhm.
people work is, don't just install firmware updates because they're new. I think we've all
Yep.
had a phone start working poorly or a PC start working poorly after we did an update. Really read the updates. I remember there was one for a competitor's product where you would might not be able to pull up the product's webpage, which nobody uses. You might not be able to pull up the product's webpage because somebody could do a DDoS attack against you. So my point was, well, I'm not going to upgrade my firmware for that reason because if I have somebody in my on my network in
Hmm.
my facility doing a DDoS attack on my Ethernet module to stop me from pulling up the Ethernet module's web page, it has no effect on anything else in the system. I got bigger problems. I got to find that intruder. But
Yeah.
you know what? There's really like that would be an inconvenience not being able to see the web page for a product versus it doesn't interfere with IO. Do I really need that patch? Am I going to schedule downtime? What's the cost benefit to doing a patch, especially if you have a lot of these? You need to really test them first, right? You
Yeah.
want to roll it out because there's nobody's perfect. There could be unknown consequences of rolling up. A lot of patches fix previous patches, right?
Hmm.
So there could be unknown consequences. So you need to read the contents, and if there's a vulnerability that affects you, then by all means take the time to understand the patch, install the patch, and understand how you can roll back from the patch. Some patches you can't,
Yep.
some firmware you can't roll back from. So
Some
those
of
are
it's
those are
hardware
pros.
dependent too. Some of these
Some of it
patches are
is.
hardware dependent, so
That's right.
you're only stuck on older revisions because now you have to protect around that asset or around that device,
Yes,
protect the
yes, you gotta.
network and prevent
Yeah.
mitigate. So
Never let
again,
that
that's
device get the vector that, like, if the vector's
yep.
FTP, well, you just ban that device from ever talking FTP again, right? Not that
Yeah.
you're probably using that, but yeah.
And I think that's part of that risk reduction piece, right? Maybe you need that FTP to as part of your process to
Yeah.
talk to your SCADA then, so you can't block that. So what do? Okay, well, let's put more physical protections around the entire ICS,
Yep.
industrial control system, right? So there's a balancing act, or maybe you just say, you know what, it's it's worth the risk to update the hardware, get the newer hardware, so that way I can get the new firmware, so then I don't have to worry about that risk, right?
Yep.
Maybe that's a better risk reduction or more cost effective risk reduction measure than the protecting around, everything else around it. So it,
Yep.
again, it's every organization is going to be unique, and I think it's important to kind of look at it as a big picture. I think 9 times out of 10 on the firmware comment, 9 times out of 10, updating firmware or patches or anything is going to cause some downtime. so
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
so that's an operational risk that has to be
Yeah.
weighed out as well. You're taking out safety, you're taking out operations, so now you can't produce products or whatever. So you have to plan around that. Do you already have downtime plan? Maybe it's not a 24/7 operation. Okay, maybe you can do it overnight. How long will it take to do acceptance test and validate
Mm,
that this didn't break
validation.
anything? And
Yep.
and how about, do we have backups? What if this doesn't work and we need
Yeah.
to get back started before first shift starts up? We got to restore it, right? Back
Yep.
to what it was before. How can we do that? How long is that going to take? So there's a lot of, again, a lot of parts to that equation, on that risk reduction equation, that people need to think about when reducing cyber risk. And again, maybe the best answer isn't to update the firmware because there's too many operational risks
Yep.
involved. Maybe the best answer is because there's too much cost around everything else. So and think about it, the older the equipment gets, right? The older the life cycle of, and I mean, in manufacturing, it's pretty common to see equipment that's 30 years old. still running, right?
Oh yeah,
You got
absolutely.
30-year-old PLCs running, a machine. Um, the older life cycle assets get, the higher the risk gets on those assets, right? I mean, look at Windows as an example. If you have a machine that's got an HMI that's running on a PC-based HMI on Windows XP,
Mhm.
as that machine gets older, what's the real reason that you need to update the operating system and the HMI screens if
Yep.
it's running, if it's working, right? A lot of times it's like, hey, this is running, it's working. I haven't had any problems with this machine. Why do I update it? And the years go by. Now Windows XP's phased out. Windows 7's phased out.
Yep.
Windows 10's phased out. Oh, but you need TPM to install Windows 11. But that hardware doesn't even have that TPM chip. So now you got to update the PC. You got to update the
Yep.
operating system, and then you got to, oh, now your HMI software doesn't support Windows 11 yet.
Yep.
So that, again, as the age of this equipment gets older, moves down that timeline, your risk kind of increases, cyber risk, and you then therefore need to adapt around it if you plan on keeping those assets for a long life cycle.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to, and it would be, going from one SCADA to another or one HMI to another is can be very daunting.
Hmm.
So sometimes you just get to lock down around it. I want to say hi to Anthony. I forgot to mention we had the chat up, so I wanted to say hi to Anthony Electrical over
Howdy.
on YouTube. We're actually going live to Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch. I added Twitch,
Nice.
Twitter, X, and Rumble. But yeah, there's a lot to consider. I would love the audience if you guys think we missed something or you think we glossed over something, or you just want to share your 2 cents, please use the talkback or the feedback link. It's a feedback link over
Hmm.
at theautomationblog.com. You can also comment on the videos, but because we're going out to so many different places, and after the show, we'll eventually be releasing these on audio only. We haven't done that yet because we only have a couple of shows, so it's a lot of work to set up a new podcast. But we'd love to get everybody's feedback and what you thought we said and didn't said, and we can either cover that in the morning show or some other time. But I think we really covered a lot of the
Yeah.
cybersecurity area. I just want before I let you go, Lewis, I'd love to know, just kind of like because you're working for Siemens every day, you see everything that's happening. What's coming up? Like, do you have any products that are just came out that you want to drive awareness with the audience, or any events that are coming that you want
Hmm.
to drive awareness to? Um, Anything that you'd like to share with the audience on kind of your ball of wax at Siemens?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff. If you haven't kept up with like the news with Siemens, there's a lot of new products, if new solutions that have come out over the last year or so. I could We could go on for days just talking about generative AI and virtual PLC and software defined automation and IT based engineering and stuff like that. But as far as events, I mean, we have quite a few events here in the U.S. planned in the next upcoming months. Like I said, I think is it next week? No, the week after next, first week of March. We have the upcoming S4 X24 Cybersecurity Conference.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, the tickets for that event are already sold out, I think. It's in Miami South Beach, but if you are already planning on attending, please come by the Siemens Room. I'll be there. We have a sponsor. We're one of the event sponsors, and we're going to
Nice.
be highlighting a lot more detail behind the cybersecurity features in our products based around IEC 62443, also based around the NIST cybersecurity framework. So whichever one you prefer to kind of reference, that's what we have all flavors kind of addressed. And then, of course, Realize Live is another big event that Siemens does every year. This year it's in Las Vegas. I don't remember the exact dates. May 13th through the 16th. The week before that, May 6th through the 9th, is Automate. That's one of the biggest shows here in the US. We're also going to be having a booth there. Come say hi to me over there. Say hi to me at Realize Live if you attend. Um, and we'll be showcasing a lot of new products, a lot of new stuff, um, talking about new innovations. We'll showcase some stuff around AI. Cybersecurity, of course, is one of my favorite topics. So always feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or again, one of these shows if you have a conversation or want to talk about different things within Siemens that cybersecurity related, or just general conversations around tech. I love talking about that too.
Me too. And just for the audience, tomorrow, I believe, we're releasing a podcast with Siemens on. So last week we did Banner IO. Tomorrow, I believe, is our podcast with Siemens on all their machine mount IO. So this is your IP67 IO,
Hmm.
and they have their interface modules, which would be like an adapter in the Rockwell world. They have them, so they now talk not only Profinet, but they
Multi-field
talk,
bus.
yeah,
Yep.
multi-field bus. They talk Ethernet IP and they talk Modbus CCP, and many of them can do that all at the same time. So that's
Yep.
really really cool. So if you haven't gotten up to speed, I know we had Raj on a couple years ago, and so we have Raj and one of his colleagues on again to talk about and bring us up to speed on what's going on with their distributed IO. And I'm meeting with just for general audience announcements. I got meetings left and right with all kinds of people trying to get them on the show. And if you're a vendor, we'd love to get you on the show. And we'll even pay all the costs for your first appearance on the show, because we just want to try to get everybody on. We have I think we have Endress Hauser coming on. We have Unitronics coming on. We just all these great companies we've never had on before. So we're excited, and we want to have old companies back. I know we have a lots of plans with Siemens and other companies to get them on the shows. And of course, this tech talk is new for us. So you can see, we moved into our new offices. We got new PCs. We got some. We're mixed the PCs around, and so yeah. So but I'm not going to jinx it. So
I just
everything's looking
realized
good right now.
you figured out how to do the zoom on the camera now.
Yeah, well, well, I'm not doing that in StreamYard, so that is
Oh, okay, okay,
something
I
with
see.
the software, the Logitech software that
Yep.
I'm using. But in any case, Lewis, I think that did you have anything else to add to the show?
No, man, I feel like we covered a lot of ground, and also, I mean, we can go for days talking about all kinds of stuff, right, Sean? So, again, I'm open for conversation. If anybody wants to follow up on something, if I did miss anything, which I likely did, then also feel free to reach out to me. And thanks for having me on, man. I'd love to do this again sometime soon.
And I appreciate that. We have Anthony threw in a question there. And I think we'll probably have to have you back to discuss this because I think this would be a great topic. I don't know if you can see the chat. Can you see it
Yeah,
from your
yeah, I
side?
just saw it. Yeah.
So he's for the audience who are listening or watching, he's saying, "Hey," and we covered this today, the Allen Bradley 1400, which I was always a big fan of,
Hmm.
um, is it's the only product left in the Micrologic Selection Guide. We covered that this morning, so all the other four are gone. They really should call it the Micrologics 1400 Selection Guide. But anyways,
Yeah.
um, that is eventually going to drop off, and he's asking, "Hey, what about the Siemens S7 1200?" So I don't know if now's the right time to talk about that, but I think, and because non-disclosures, you sign these things, you can't talk about them. But I think we might want to have Lewis back on in the future to talk about some exciting new things that may or may not happen in the future. Did I do that correctly?
I don't sure.
Okay.
I mean, look, we always have new products coming out. I mean,
Yeah.
S7 1200 is one of our most reliable PLCs
Awesome.
that
Yes.
we've had for I want to say since 2010, so it's or 2009, so almost 15 years on the market, and it's still probably one of the best, most advanced compact PLCs today. So um, I don't see it going away soon. It's a very popular PLC. It's very reliable, very cost effective, and has a lot of cool advanced features that you got on the S7 1500. But I mean, we're always coming out with new stuff all the time, and we just announced the virtual PLC at SPS. Oh, sorry, at Hanover last year, um, which is S7 1500 based, but it's hardware independent, right? It's based off our Industrial Edge platform. We have new features within our 1500. Actually, there's a new firmware with the 1200 that's coming out. Um, what are we in March? No, we're in February. So next month, new firmware coming out with the 1200. Again, some new cybersecurity features
Yep.
that we introduced with V19 and everything. So we're still innovating. We're still that 1200 is still going to be around. And yeah, I mean,
It's a great
I think it's
product.
I think it's
We
a perfect replacement for the 1400.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at something to do today and you can't get the 1400, check out the 1200. It does not have a display on it, but and we cover this in my course. I teach both the 1200 and 1500 side by side. They're almost identical, really.
Mhm.
It's not like when you're thinking about the Micro 800 and the Compact Logics, right? Two different software packages, and I
Mhm.
like the 800. Don't get me wrong, but when you go from a 1200 to 1500, it's the same. Now, some of the I/O is different, right? Because less expensive I/O is
Mhm.
going to have less hardware features, and the 1500 supports more languages and more data types. But we are actually teaching here. We just got them a bunch of 1200s, and I highly
Oh
recommend them.
yeah.
We've covered the
Yep.
starter packs a bunch of times on the shows and in the articles at the Automation blog. Great, great value. Definitely could recommend it. I'm still a fan of the 1400. I wish it was being innovated on and updated too. But hey, I don't own the company, so but yeah, so anybody interested in that. But I also would say that, and I can't say what it is, but there's always new stuff coming out from all vendors. So,
Mhm.
what we have today from Siemens and the other vendors, 6 months down the road, we may have even new stuff. So always keep that in mind. I know I've had problems where I pigeonholed a particular vendor, like this is what they had, and then when did not realizing they had come out with new stuff. I also want to say to Wolfgang, I want to say hi. Can you answer that question? From Wolfgang.
Yes.
So
I
Wolfgang
just
asked, "Is Siemens getting more into the U.S. market?" And I don't. I think all the major PLC players have been in the U.S. market, or all the industrial automation players have been in the U.S. market for. I mean, going back to the
I
first
mean,
PLC competition back in '69.
yeah, I mean it's no surprise. I mean, Siemens is the number one um let's say automation vendor globally, right? With about a third of the market share. So when you hear, Roland Bush and other Siemens executives say like, hey, Siemens PLCs are on one third of every machine across the world, it's not a lie. I mean, the numbers don't lie. Um, but it's also no secret that in the U.S. we're not as popular, but we are definitely gaining popularity. I think people are starting to, you know, demand kind of those open feature sets and those kind of interoperability pieces you mentioned, even like the multi-field bus, right?
Yeah.
And I think those kinds of things show that Siemens is a lot more let's say open and flexible when it comes to manufacturing systems as opposed to a lot more closed traditional um, industrial control systems. So I think we're gaining a lot of ground, not just in the U.S. but a lot of other places globally.
And I want to just add to that. I see my job as bringing you, the audience, information on everybody, right?
Hmm.
So I just don't want to be like a car and driver, and I only cover my favorite car, the Dodge Charger, right? Because that's what I drive. I want to cover all of the automakers, right? If in this analogy, I want to
What's
cover
your favorite
everything,
PLC? I'm just kidding.
right? So, but I want to cover, and we do this on the morning show twice a week. We just try to cover everybody, whether it's from ABB to Siemens
Yep.
to Rockwell to Schneider, because my job is just to bring you guys information about it all, and then you guys pick what you like. And
Hmm.
I got to tell you, having been in this industry 34 years in the United States, in my background, Siemens was always there with Rockwell and Schneider and all the other guys. So I think if you're seeing them more, maybe it's because I'm doing a better job of bringing more a variety of vendors out there, and you're seeing more Siemens and more of the other guys too, or some other reason. Maybe it's not. Maybe I'm not doing a good job. But in any case, Wolfgang, thank you for the message. Anthony, thank you for the messages and questions. And Lewis, thank you for coming on the show. Really appreciate
Yep.
it, man.
Thank you.
All right. With that, guys, we're going to sign out. Sorry for the camera issues, but until tomorrow, I wish you guys all peace. Oh, look at that.
Got to do the Shawn Tierney peace sign. See you, everybody.
And now I've lost all my screens. Which screen do I have to turn off? Bye, guys.
Let's see. It looks like it's still